The Zephyrian battle cruiser Nightmare's Edge hung in the void like a metallic predator, its hull bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge, his four arms crossed behind his back as he gazed at the small human research station orbiting the barren moon below. The facility looked pathetic compared to his mighty vessel, a collection of interconnected modules that barely qualified as a military target. Admiral, his second-in-command, Commander Vextal, approached with visible excitement. The terror gas canisters are loaded and ready for deployment. The humans will experience fear beyond their comprehension. Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. The Zephyrians had spent decades perfecting their psychological warfare weapons, and the terror gas represented the pinnacle of their achievement. The compound worked by hijacking the victim's nervous system, flooding their brain with manufactured panic and overwhelming dread. Most species exposed to even trace amounts would collapse into catatonic states within minutes, their minds shattered by artificial terror. "Excellent," Kethvar replied, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through countless victories. "Begin the assault. Let these humans understand why the galaxy fears our name." The research station was designated Human Science Outpost Kepler-7, and it housed a crew of 37 researchers, engineers, and support staff. They were conducting experiments on atmospheric processing, hoping to develop better terraforming technologies for humanity's expanding colonies. The work was peaceful, scientific, and utterly unprepared for military action. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the main laboratory, examining atmospheric samples through a quantum microscope when the proximity alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in urgent patterns, casting eerie shadows across the sterile white walls. She looked up from her work, confusion evident on her weathered face. "What's happening?" she called out to her colleague, Dr. James Chun, who was frantically checking the external sensor readings on his workstation. "There's a Zephyrian warship in orbit," James replied, his voice tight with concern. "It's massive, Elena. This isn't a patrol vessel or reconnaissance ship. This is a full battle cruiser." Elena felt her stomach drop. Relations between humans and Zephyrians had been tense since first contact 5 years ago, but there had been no formal declaration of hostilities. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors, but they typically targeted strategic worlds or resource-rich systems. Kepler-7 was a backwater research facility with no military or economic value. Station Commander Marcus Webb's voice crackled over the intercom system. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We have an unidentified Zephyrian vessel demanding our immediate surrender. All research staff report to designated safe zones immediately. This is a code red situation." Elena grabbed her emergency kit and rushed toward the safe zone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Why would the Zephyrians waste resources attacking a science station? What could they possibly want from their atmospheric research? On the bridge of the Nightmare's Edge, Admiral Kethvar watched the deployment with professional interest. Specially designed drones launched from his ship's weapons bays, each one carrying pressurized canisters of terror gas. The drones moved with mechanical precision toward the human station, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. "Target the station's life support intake valves," Kethvar ordered. "I want the gas distributed throughout their entire facility within 10 minutes. Make sure every human breathes our gift." The drones attached themselves to the station's external systems like parasites, their drill assemblies boring through the outer hull to access the environmental controls. Specialized injection systems pumped the terror gas directly into the air circulation network, ensuring it would reach every compartment, every corridor, every hiding place the humans might use. Dr. Marcus Thompson was alone in Environmental Lab 3 when the first traces of the gas reached his location. He was an atmospheric chemist with 15 years of experience studying alien environments, and he immediately noticed the subtle change in air quality. There was a faint, sweet smell that reminded him of overripe fruit mixed with ozone. He activated his atmospheric analyzer and watched as strange readings appeared on his screen. The molecular composition was unlike anything in his database. Complex organic compounds that seemed designed to interact with biological systems. His scientific curiosity overrode his fear as he realized he was witnessing the deployment of an unknown chemical weapon. Fascinating, he muttered, taking detailed readings even as he felt the first effects beginning to manifest in his body. According to the scanner, he was breathing in massive quantities of a psychoactive compound that should have been triggering intense panic responses in his nervous system. But Marcus felt nothing except scientific excitement. The gas was clearly designed to induce terror in its victims, but for some inexplicable reason, it wasn't working on him. If anything, he felt more alert and focused than usual, as if the compound was having the opposite of its intended effect. Throughout the station, similar scenes were playing out with remarkable consistency. Dr. Sarah Kim was in the hydroponics bay when the gas reached her, and instead of collapsing in fear, she found herself calmly documenting the physical symptoms she was experiencing. Her heart rate increased slightly, her pupils dilated, but the overwhelming terror that should have accompanied these changes simply never materialized. In the main laboratory, Elena and James were huddled together with 6 other researchers when the sweet-smelling gas began flooding their compartment. They had sealed the doors and activated emergency air scrubbers, but the gas was coming through the ventilation system itself. "We're dead," James whispered, his voice filled with resignation. "I've heard stories about Zephyrian terror weapons. They say victims go insane from fear before their hearts give out." Elena breathed deeply, expecting to feel panic overwhelm her rational mind. Instead, she felt a strange, tingling sensation in her limbs and a heightened awareness of her surroundings. The laboratory equipment seemed more vivid, the colors more intense, but there was no fear, no terror, no overwhelming dread. "James," she said slowly, "I don't think it's working." Similar reports were coming in over the station's internal communication network. Research assistants described feeling energized rather than terrified. Engineers reported increased focus and problem-solving abilities. Even the station's security team, who should have been the most susceptible to psychological warfare, were experiencing nothing more than mild stimulation. Commander Webb monitored the reports from the station's command center, his confusion growing with each passing minute. According to their atmospheric sensors, the entire facility was saturated with the alien gas. Every person on the station had been breathing the compound for over 20 minutes. By all accounts, they should have been incapacitated or worse. "Sir," Communications Officer Lisa Park reported, "I'm picking up transmissions from the Zephyrian vessel. They're demanding to know why we haven't surrendered yet." Webb allowed himself a small smile. "Tell them we're still evaluating their terms." On the Nightmare's edge, Admiral Kethvar was experiencing his first taste of genuine confusion in decades of military service. His terror gas was the most potent psychological weapon ever developed by Zephyrian science. It had been tested on dozens of species across the galaxy, and the results were always the same: complete psychological breakdown within 15 minutes of exposure. "Commander Vextal," he barked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "explain to me why the humans are still functioning." Vextal's 4 arms gestured helplessly as he reviewed the sensor data. "Sir, our readings confirm that the gas has been successfully deployed throughout their facility. Atmospheric analysis shows saturation levels that would incapacitate any known species. The humans should be catatonic by now. Perhaps their life support systems have some kind of filtration we didn't account for," suggested the ship science officer, a young Zephyrian named Deckmore. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Impossible. Our drones bypassed their filters and injected the gas directly into their closed-loop system. Every molecule of air in that station is saturated with terror compound." The truth was beginning to dawn on the Zephyrian command crew, though none of them wanted to voice the impossible conclusion. The humans weren't just resistant to their terror gas. They seemed to be completely immune to its effects. Back on the research station, Dr. Thompson had made a remarkable discovery. His analysis of the gas revealed that it was designed to trigger specific neurochemical responses in the brain, particularly in regions associated with fear and anxiety. The compound was incredibly sophisticated, clearly the result of advanced xenobiology research. But there was something the Zephyrians had miscalculated. Human neurochemistry, while similar to many other species, had unique characteristics that the aliens hadn't accounted for. The terror gas was designed to flood the victim's system with artificial stress hormones and panic responses. In humans, however, the compound was interacting with their brain chemistry in an entirely different way. Instead of triggering fear, the gas was being metabolized as a mild stimulant. The same neurochemical pathways that should have induced terror were instead producing increased alertness, enhanced problem-solving abilities, and improved mood. The humans weren't just surviving the attack, they were being inadvertently enhanced by it. Elena discovered this herself when she found her analytical thinking becoming remarkably sharp. Complex atmospheric equations that normally took her hours to solve were now crystal clear in her mind. She was processing information faster and more efficiently than ever before in her career. "James," she said excitedly, "I think we need to analyze this gas more thoroughly. I don't think it's just failing to affect us. I think it's actually helping us." James looked at her skeptically until he tried to recall a complex formula he had been struggling with for weeks. To his amazement, the equation appeared in his mind with perfect clarity, as if someone had suddenly turned on a light in a dark room. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Whatever this compound is, it's enhancing our cognitive functions instead of impairing them." Word of their discovery spread quickly through the station's communication network. Researchers began conducting impromptu experiments on themselves, testing their enhanced abilities and documenting the unexpected effects. Dr. Kim, in hydroponics, discovered she could visualize complex plant genetic sequences with unprecedented clarity. The engineering team found they could solve structural problems that had been plaguing them for months. The station's medical officer, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, was particularly fascinated by the physiological effects. "I'm seeing increased neural activity across all brain regions," she reported to Commander Webb. "It's as if the gas is acting like a cognitive enhancer rather than a weapon. Heart rates are slightly elevated, but within normal parameters for light exercise. Blood pressure is stable, reflexes are improved, and cognitive test scores are showing dramatic improvements across the board." Commander Webb processed this information with growing amazement. Not only were his people surviving what should have been a devastating attack, but they were actually being improved by it. The implications were staggering. On the Zephyrian ship, Admiral Kethvar was facing the first major failure of his military career. His terror gas, the weapon that had brought countless civilizations to their knees, was not only ineffective against humans, but seemed to be benefiting them somehow. "Sir," reported his weapons officer, "the humans are actually sending us scientific data about our own weapon. They're analyzing it and sharing the results with us." Kethvar's forearms trembled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The humans weren't just surviving his attack. They were treating it as a research opportunity. They were studying his most classified weapon and broadcasting their findings as if it were a routine scientific experiment. The transmitted data was even more humiliating. The humans had not only identified the gas's intended effects, but had also determined why it was failing. Their analysis revealed fundamental flaws in the Zephyrians' understanding of human physiology and neurochemistry. Dr. Thompson's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Dr. Marcus Thompson aboard the Human Research Station. We've completed our preliminary analysis of your biological weapon, and we thought you might be interested in our findings." The bridge of the Nightmare's Edge fell silent as the human scientist continued his report with academic enthusiasm. "Your terror compound is quite sophisticated, showing clear evidence of advanced biochemical engineering. However, It appears to be calibrated for neurochemical systems significantly different from human physiology. In our species, the compound acts as a nootropic enhancer rather than a fear inducer. We're actually experiencing improved cognitive function, enhanced memory recall, and increased problem-solving capabilities. Kethvar listened to the human's analysis with growing horror. Not only had his weapon failed, but the humans were explaining exactly why it had failed, demonstrating a level of scientific understanding that made his own research teams look like amateurs. Furthermore, Dr. Thompson continued cheerfully, "We believe we can synthesize a modified version that might be more effective against human physiology if you're interested in collaboration rather than conflict. We're always eager to advance the cause of scientific knowledge." The absurdity of the situation finally broke through Kethvar's military conditioning. He was being offered scientific collaboration by the very people he had just attempted to terrorize into submission. The humans weren't just immune to his most fearsome weapon. They were treating the entire attack as an interesting research project and offering to help him improve his methods. For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar found himself completely out of his depth, facing an enemy that responded to terror with curiosity and chemical warfare with scientific enthusiasm. The humans had just taught him a lesson that would reshape his understanding of what it meant to be truly terrifying. Sometimes the most frightening response to fear is a smile and a request for more data. Commander Webb stood in the station's central command hub, watching the bizarre diplomatic situation unfold before him. For the past 6 hours, what had begun as a potential massacre had transformed into the galaxy's most unusual scientific conference. The Zephyrian terror gas continued to circulate through the station's atmosphere, and his research team was producing breakthrough discoveries at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Elena Vasquez had just published a complete molecular breakdown of the terror compound, identifying 17 distinct neurochemical triggers that she claimed could revolutionize their understanding of xenobiology. Dr. Chun had mapped the gas's interaction pathways with human neural networks and discovered 3 potential applications for treating cognitive disorders. Even the station's maintenance crew was contributing insights about atmospheric distribution systems that could improve terraforming efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on Webb. The Zephyrians had inadvertently provided humanity with the greatest research opportunity in their history, and they had done it while trying to destroy a science station. "Sir," Communications Officer Park reported, "Admiral Kethvar is requesting another private channel discussion. He sounds different than before." Webb nodded. The Zephyrian commander had been growing increasingly frustrated as the hours passed, and it became clear that not only was his weapon ineffective, but the humans were actively benefiting from exposure to it. The last 3 communications had shown a dramatic shift from military threats to confused scientific inquiries. "Put him through," Webb ordered. Admiral Kethvar's image appeared on the main screen, his alien features betraying emotions that Webb was beginning to recognize despite the species difference. The 4-armed commander looked haggard, his mandibles twitching in what appeared to be nervous agitation. "Commander Webb," Kethvar began, his translated voice carrying a note of desperate confusion, "I must ask you directly. Are your people truly experiencing enhanced cognitive function from exposure to our terror compound?" Webb smiled. Over the past few hours, he had discovered that his own enhanced mental state was making diplomatic conversations remarkably easy. Complex political calculations that normally required careful consideration were now resolved almost instantly in his mind. "Admiral, I can confirm that your weapon has had the opposite effect of what you intended. Our research teams are operating at approximately 130% of their normal efficiency. Problem-solving abilities have increased across the board, memory recall has improved significantly, and several researchers have made breakthrough discoveries in their respective fields." Kethvar's 4 arms moved in what Webb had learned was a gesture of extreme frustration among Zephyrians. "This is impossible. Our terror gas has been tested on 47 different species across the galaxy. The results are always consistent. complete psychological breakdown within 30 minutes of exposure. Perhaps, Webb suggested diplomatically, the issue isn't with your methodology, but with your assumptions about human physiology. We're a relatively young species on the galactic stage. It's possible that our neurochemical development took a different evolutionary path than the species you've previously encountered. What Webb didn't mention was the growing suspicion among his research team that humanity's unique response to the terror gas might reveal something significant about their species' evolutionary history. Dr. Rodriguez had been conducting detailed analyses of the neurochemical interactions, and her preliminary findings suggested that human brain chemistry had some unusual characteristics that set them apart from other known intelligent species. On the Nightmare's edge, Admiral Kethvar was grappling with implications that extended far beyond military strategy. His science team had been analyzing the humans' research data, and what they were discovering challenged fundamental assumptions about biochemistry and xenobiology that the Zephyrian Empire had held for centuries. Admiral, Science Officer Deckmore reported, the human research data is extraordinary. Their analysis of our terror compound is more sophisticated than anything our own teams have produced. They've identified molecular interaction pathways that we never even detected. Kethvar studied the incoming data streams with growing amazement. The humans weren't just immune to Zephyrian psychological warfare. They were demonstrating scientific capabilities that suggested their species might be far more advanced than anyone had realized. Sir, Deckmore continued hesitantly, there's something else. The humans have identified what they call optimization factors in our terror compound. They believe that with minor modifications, the same chemical principles could be used to create cognitive enhancement drugs for various species. They're essentially proposing to turn our weapon into medicine. The strategic implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Empire's most classified weapon was being casually reverse-engineered by human scientists who were treating the entire process as an interesting academic exercise. Worse, they were doing it better than Zephyrian researchers had managed in decades of development. Back on the research station, Dr. Thompson was making discoveries that would have taken him years under normal circumstances. The enhanced cognitive state induced by the terror gas had allowed him to see patterns and connections in his data that had previously been invisible. He was currently working on his 7th major breakthrough of the day, a revolutionary new approach to atmospheric processing that could reduce terraforming costs by 70%. Elena, he called out to Dr. Vasquez, who was hunched over a quantum computer running complex molecular simulations. Have you considered the possibility that this gas might have applications beyond cognitive enhancement? Elena looked up from her work, her eyes bright with the intensity that had characterized all the researchers since exposure began. What do you mean? I've been thinking about the molecular structure, Thompson explained, his thoughts flowing with unusual clarity. The compound is designed to trigger specific neurochemical responses, but it's doing so through pathways that involve the entire nervous system. What if we could modify it to enhance physical coordination, reaction times, or even healing responses? The possibility sent ripples of excitement through the research team. They had been so focused on the cognitive benefits that they hadn't fully explored the compound's potential for broader physiological enhancement. If Thompson's hypothesis was correct, the Zephyrians had inadvertently provided humanity with the foundation for a comprehensive human augmentation program. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the medical effects most closely, joined the discussion. I've been seeing improvements in immune system responses as well, she reported. White blood cell activity has increased by 20% across all subjects, and cellular repair mechanisms seem to be operating more efficiently. This compound isn't just affecting the brain, it's optimizing multiple biological systems. The implications were becoming clear. The terror gas wasn't just failing as a weapon. It was revealing that humans had unique physiological characteristics that allowed them to benefit from exposure to compounds that would devastate other species. Admiral Kethvar was reaching the same conclusion from his position aboard the Nightmare's Edge. His intelligence reports suggested that humans were a relatively young species that had achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. Their rapid expansion through the galaxy had been attributed to luck and determination rather than any inherent advantages. But the events of the past day were revealing a different picture. Humans weren't just lucky or determined. They were biologically unique in ways that could reshape galactic power structures. A species that could turn weapons into enhancements and psychological warfare into research opportunities was not a species to be underestimated. Commander Vextal, Kethvar ordered, transmit a message to High Command. Inform them that our assessment of human capabilities requires immediate revision. These beings represent a potential strategic asset rather than a simple conquest target. Vextal's 4 arms moved in acknowledgement, but his expression showed confusion. Sir, are you recommending that we abort the mission and withdraw? Kethvar considered the question carefully. His original orders had been to test Zephyrian terror weapons against human targets and assess their effectiveness for future military operations. The test had certainly provided clear results, though not in the way anyone had anticipated. No, he decided finally, we're going to do something unprecedented. We're going to negotiate. The decision sent shockwaves through the bridge crew. In the centuries-long history of the Zephyrian Empire, they had never negotiated with a species they had attacked. Their standard procedure was conquest, subjugation, and integration into their imperial structure. Negotiation implied equality, and the Empire had never acknowledged any species as their equal. But the humans had demonstrated something that demanded respect. They had faced the Empire's most fearsome weapon and turned it into a gift. They had responded to an attack with scientific curiosity and an offer of collaboration. Most importantly, they had revealed capabilities that could benefit both species if properly developed. Commander Webb received the negotiation request with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. His enhanced cognitive state had allowed him to predict this outcome hours ago, but experiencing it was still remarkable. The Zephyrians were essentially asking for permission to transform their failed attack into a peaceful research partnership. Admiral, Webb responded over the communication channel, we would be honored to discuss the possibilities for collaboration. Our preliminary research suggests that your terror compound could be the foundation for remarkable advances in multiple fields. We believe that working together, our species could develop applications that would benefit the entire galaxy. What Webb didn't mention was that his scientists had already identified the terror gas's weaknesses and developed several potential countermeasures. If necessary, they could neutralize the compound's effects on other species while maintaining the beneficial reactions in humans. The strategic advantage this represented was enormous, but Webb was more interested in the peaceful applications. Dr. Vasquez had been working on one particularly exciting possibility. Her analysis suggested that a modified version of the terror compound could serve as a universal translator at the neurochemical level, allowing different species to share enhanced cognitive states and improve communication. The implications for interstellar diplomacy were revolutionary. James, she called to Dr. Chun, look at this simulation. I think we can create a modified compound that would allow Zephyrians and humans to share cognitive enhancement effects. Imagine the research possibilities if our species could literally think together. Chun examined her data with growing excitement. The modified compound would need to account for the significant differences between human and Zephyrian neurochemistry, but the basic principles appeared sound. They were looking at the potential for true interspecies collaboration at a level never before achieved in galactic history. The research station had become a hub of activity that resembled a university laboratory more than a facility under siege. Scientists from multiple departments were collaborating on projects that combined their enhanced cognitive abilities with the unique properties of the terror gas. Engineering teams were developing new manufacturing techniques, medical researchers were exploring therapeutic applications, and even the support staff were contributing insights that advanced the work. Commander Webb realized that they were witnessing something unprecedented, an entire human community operating at enhanced intellectual capacity while maintaining their emotional stability and social cooperation. The terror gas had revealed that humans possessed a remarkable ability to adapt and thrive under conditions that would destroy other species. Admiral Kethvar was coming to similar conclusions aboard his warship. His analysis of the human responses had revealed patterns that challenged everything the Zephyrian Empire thought it knew about intelligent life. Humans didn't just survive adversity. They transformed it into opportunity. Deckmore, he addressed his science officer, prepare a full report on human capabilities for transmission to the Imperial Science Council. Include all data we've gathered about their neurochemical responses and their analytical methods. I believe we're looking at a species that could revolutionize our understanding of biological adaptation. The young science officer's mandibles clicked with excitement. Sir, should I include their offers of collaboration? Kethvar considered the question. Collaboration with conquered species was standard practice, but collaboration with equals was foreign to Zephyrian culture. However, the humans had demonstrated that they were far from helpless victims. They possessed capabilities that could benefit the Empire significantly, but only if they were treated as partners rather than subjects. Yes, he decided. Include everything. The High Command needs to understand that these humans represent an opportunity rather than a threat. As the day progressed, the distinction between attacker and victim continued to blur. The research station was sharing its discoveries freely with the Zephyrian ship, while Admiral Kethvar was providing technical data about the terror gas that accelerated the human research efforts. What had begun as a military attack was evolving into the most productive scientific collaboration in galactic history. Dr. Thompson made perhaps the most significant discovery late in the day. His enhanced cognitive abilities had allowed him to identify the evolutionary factors that gave humans their unique response to the terror compound. According to his analysis, human ancestors had survived multiple extinction events by developing neurochemical systems that could rapidly adapt to environmental toxins and convert potential threats into survival advantages. We're looking at millions of years of evolutionary pressure that selected for cognitive flexibility and biochemical adaptability, he explained to the gathered research teams. Humans aren't just immune to terror weapons. We're evolutionarily optimized to benefit from them. The discovery explained not just their resistance to the Zephyrian gas, but humanity's rapid expansion through the galaxy despite being a relatively young spacefaring species. Humans weren't succeeding through superior technology or military might. They were succeeding because their species had evolved to thrive in hostile environments by transforming threats into advantages. As the research station's day cycle drew to a close, both human and Zephyrian crews found themselves contemplating a future neither had anticipated. The terror gas continued to circulate through the station's atmosphere, maintaining the enhanced cognitive state that had made the day's discoveries possible. But both species were beginning to understand that the real discovery wasn't the gas itself. It was what humanity's response revealed about the possibilities for interspecies cooperation in a galaxy full of untapped potential. 3 weeks after what historians would later call the Kepler-7 incident, the Human Research Station had become the unofficial center of the most ambitious scientific collaboration in galactic history. The terror gas had long since been neutralized from the station's atmosphere, but its effects on human understanding of their own capabilities continued to reverberate throughout the galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the newly constructed diplomatic wing of the station, watching as Zephyrian scientists worked alongside human researchers in laboratories that had been hastily modified to accommodate both species' environmental needs. The sight still amazed her. Members of 2 civilizations that had been on the verge of warfare were now sharing data, techniques, and even jokes about the absurdity of their first encounter. Elena, Dr. Thompson called from across the lab, you need to see this latest analysis from the Zephyrian biochemistry team. They've identified 17 different species that might benefit from modified versions of their terror compound. We're looking at the foundation for an entirely new field of xenobiological medicine. Elena reviewed the data with growing excitement. The Zephyrian research, combined with human insights about adaptation and enhancement, was revealing possibilities that neither species could have achieved independently. They weren't just reverse engineering a weapon, they were creating the theoretical framework for biological optimization across multiple species. Commander Webb had been promoted to Special Diplomatic Liaison, a newly created position that reflected the unique nature of humanity's first major interstellar alliance. He spent his days coordinating between human research teams, Zephyrian scientists, and the growing number of observers from other galactic civilizations who had requested permission to study the unprecedented collaboration. The political implications were staggering. When news of the Kepler-7 incident reached other civilizations, the initial response had been disbelief. The Zephyrian Empire, known throughout the galaxy for its ruthless expansion and devastating weapons, had not only failed to conquer a human research station, but had entered in a voluntary partnership with their intended victims. Ambassador Sarah Chun, recently arrived from Earth's diplomatic corps, was briefing Webb on the latest developments from human space. "Marcus, you have no idea how this has changed everything. The Galactic Trade Council is treating humanity as a major power for the first time. 3 different civilizations have requested formal diplomatic contact, and there are rumors that the Andromedan Collective wants to discuss alliance possibilities." Webb nodded, though his attention was partially focused on the research reports flooding his desk. The enhanced cognitive abilities he had experienced during the gas exposure had faded, but the insights gained during that period continued to influence his thinking. "What's Earth's position on all this?" "Cautious optimism," Chen replied. "The Science Council is ecstatic about the research possibilities, but the Military Advisory Committee is concerned about the strategic implications. We're the only species known to be immune to Zephyrian terror weapons, which makes us valuable allies and potentially dangerous enemies." The military concerns weren't unfounded. Admiral Kethvar had submitted detailed reports to Zephyrian High Command about human capabilities, and those reports had fundamentally altered the Empire's strategic planning. Humans were no longer viewed as a primitive species suitable for conquest. They were recognized as potential equals whose unique abilities could reshape galactic power balances. On the bridge of the Nightmare's Edge, now permanently stationed as a research vessel rather than a warship, Admiral Kethvar was conducting his own analysis of the situation's implications. His career had taken an unprecedented turn from military conquest to scientific diplomacy, and he was discovering that he preferred the new role. "Admiral," Science Officer Deckmore reported, "we've received authorization from High Command to share our terror weapon research archives with the human teams. They're particularly interested in the variant compounds we've developed for different species." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The decision represented a fundamental shift in Zephyrian policy. For centuries, their terror weapons had been classified at the highest levels, shared only with trusted military personnel. Opening the archives to human scientists was an act of unprecedented trust. "Excellent," Kethvar replied. "Transmit everything to Dr. Vasquez's team, and inform them that our Imperial Biochemistry Institute has volunteered to collaborate on their Universal Enhancement Project." The Universal Enhancement Project was perhaps the most ambitious undertaking to emerge from the collaboration. Human scientists, working with their enhanced understanding of adaptation mechanisms, had proposed developing a series of compounds that could provide cognitive and physical benefits to multiple species simultaneously. The project required detailed knowledge of xenobiology that only the Zephyrian Empire possessed, combined with human insights about biological optimization. Dr. Rodriguez had been leading the medical research team, and her findings were revolutionizing understanding of human physiology. "We've discovered that our species' response to the terror gas wasn't just immune resistance," she explained to the assembled researchers. "Humans appear to have evolved what we're calling adaptive neurochemistry. Our brains can rapidly restructure their chemical processes to benefit from environmental challenges rather than being harmed by them." The discovery had implications far beyond the immediate research. It suggested that humans might be naturally suited for environments that other species would find hostile or impossible. Their ancestors' survival through multiple planetary catastrophes had selected for individuals who could not just endure adversity, but transform it into evolutionary advantage. Commander Vextau, who had remained as Admiral Kethvar's second-in-command despite the mission's transformation, was struggling to adapt to their new role as scientific facilitators rather than military conquerors. "Admiral," he confessed during a private meeting, "I find myself questioning everything we've learned about warfare and diplomacy. These humans have turned our greatest weapon into a gift. How do we plan for enemies who respond to attacks with gratitude?" Kethvar had been contemplating the same question. Traditional Zephyrian military doctrine was based on the assumption that all species would respond to threats with fear, anger, or desperation. Humans had demonstrated a completely different response pattern. They faced threats with curiosity, collaboration, and innovation. Perhaps, Kethvar suggested, the lesson isn't about how to defeat such an enemy, but about whether such a species should be considered an enemy at all. The humans have shown us possibilities we never imagined. Maybe our empire needs to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about power and conquest. The philosophical implications were rippling throughout Zephyrian society. Military academies were studying the Kepler-7 incident as an example of how traditional strategic thinking could fail when confronted with truly alien psychology. Diplomatic corps that had existed primarily to manage conquered populations were developing new frameworks for genuine partnership between equals. Dr. Thompson had been appointed as the lead researcher for interspecies cognitive enhancement, a role that required him to work directly with Zephyrian biochemists to develop compounds that could safely enhance multiple species simultaneously. The work was challenging both scientifically and culturally, as it required unprecedented levels of trust and cooperation. The fundamental challenge, he explained to his mixed human-Zephyrian research team, is that each species has evolved different neurochemical pathways to achieve similar cognitive functions. We need to create compounds that can work with these different systems without causing harmful interactions. Young Zephyrian researcher Jektau, who had volunteered for the interspecies program, offered a suggestion that demonstrated the growing collaboration. "Dr. Thompson, what if we approach this from the opposite direction? Instead of creating compounds that work for all species, what if we developed species-specific variants that produce compatible enhancement effects? Different paths to similar destinations." The idea sparked intensive discussion among the research team. Rather than seeking a universal solution, they could develop a family of related compounds that would allow different species to achieve enhanced cognitive states that were compatible for collaboration while remaining safe for each species' unique physiology. Elena found herself serving as an unofficial ambassador between the human and Zephyrian research communities. Her experience with atmospheric chemistry provided a useful foundation for understanding the complex interactions between biological systems and environmental factors. "The most remarkable thing," she told Ambassador Chun during one of their regular briefings, "is how naturally the collaboration developed. Once we got past the initial shock of being attacked, working with the Zephyrians has been remarkably smooth. They approach problems differently than we do, but their methods complement ours in ways that produce better results than either species could achieve alone." Chun nodded thoughtfully. "Earth's xenopsychology teams are fascinated by your reports. The prevailing theory had been that interspecies cooperation would be difficult due to fundamental differences in thought patterns and social structures. Your experience suggests that those differences might actually be beneficial rather than problematic." The observation was supported by data from across the research station. Human intuitive leaps and creative problem-solving combined effectively with Zephyrian systematic analysis and methodical testing. Zephyrian patience and attention to detail balanced human enthusiasm and rapid adaptation. The species seemed naturally suited for collaboration despite their completely different evolutionary backgrounds. Admiral Kethvar had been observing the same phenomenon from his perspective aboard the research vessel. His crew was working more effectively with their human counterparts than many all-Zephyrian teams he had commanded. The differences between the species seemed to create productive synergies rather than conflicts. Deckmore, he addressed his science officer, prepare a supplemental report for High Command. I want to document not just the technical discoveries we're making, but the collaborative methodologies that are making them possible. This partnership model could be valuable for future interspecies projects. The young officer's enthusiasm was evident. Sir, should I include recommendations for expanding the program to other species? Kethvar considered the suggestion carefully. The success of the human-Zephyrian collaboration was already attracting attention from across the galaxy. Several civilizations had expressed interest in participating in the research, though whether they could integrate as smoothly as humans remained to be seen. Include it as a possibility for future consideration, he decided, but emphasize that the success we're seeing here appears to depend on specific complementary characteristics between humans and Zephyrians. We shouldn't assume the same results with other species. Meanwhile, Dr. Vasquez was making a discovery that would reshape their understanding of the terror gas's original effects. Her analysis of the molecular structure had revealed that the compound wasn't designed as a simple fear inducer. It was actually a sophisticated biological modifier that was supposed to rewrite the victim's neurochemical patterns to make them more compliant and less capable of independent thought. The Zephyrians weren't just trying to terrify us, she explained to the gathered research teams. They were attempting to modify our brain chemistry to make us suitable for integration into their empire. The terror was just the first stage of a complete psychological restructuring process. The revelation cast the human response in an even more remarkable light. Not only had they resisted the intended psychological effects, but their adaptive neurochemistry had converted the modification attempt into cognitive enhancement. They had turned a weapon designed to destroy independent thought into a tool that enhanced their ability to think and innovate. Admiral Kethvar received Elena's findings with a mixture of embarrassment and amazement. The terror gas represented decades of research in psychological control and species subjugation. The fact that humans had not only resisted its effects, but had turned it into a beneficial enhancement suggested capabilities that were truly unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Vasquez, he addressed her over the communication channel, your discovery explains much about why our empire has been successful in the past, and why our encounter with humans has been so different. Most species we've encountered were susceptible to our modification attempts. Humans appear to be evolutionarily resistant to external psychological control. Elena considered the implications. Admiral, this suggests that our species might be naturally suited for maintaining independence and autonomy even under extreme external pressure. That could explain why human societies have consistently favored democratic and collaborative structures rather than hierarchical control systems. The observations sparked new lines of research into the relationship between neurochemistry and social organization. If humans were biologically resistant to psychological modification, it would explain their preference for systems that preserved individual autonomy and encouraged diverse perspectives. As the third week of collaboration drew to a close, both species were beginning to understand that they had stumbled upon something far more significant than a failed military attack. They were witnessing the birth of a new model for interspecies relationship, one based on complementary capabilities rather than dominance and submission. The research station had become a symbol of possibilities that neither humans nor Zephyrians had previously imagined. Former enemies were working together to develop technologies that could benefit the entire galaxy, and their success was inspiring other civilizations to reconsider their own assumptions about conflict, cooperation, and the nature of intelligence itself. Commander Webb found himself contemplating the long-term implications as he watched human and Zephyrian researchers working side by side in the main laboratory. The terror gas attack that was supposed to have ended with human subjugation had instead opened pathways to collaboration that could reshape galactic civilization. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important victories were won not by defeating your enemies, but by discovering that they didn't have to be enemies at all. 6 months after the Kepler-7 incident, the small research station had been transformed into the galaxy's first interspecies collaborative research institute. The original modules have been expanded with contributions from both human and Zephyrian engineering teams, creating a facility that could accommodate researchers from dozens of different species. What had begun as humanity's most desperate moment had become their greatest triumph. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the Institute's new central observatory, watching as ships from across the galaxy approached the station. Representatives from the Andromedan Collective, the Silicon-based Crystalline Federation, and even the enigmatic gas giant dwellers had arrived to witness the unveiling of the first successful universal cognitive enhancement compound. The compound, officially designated adaptive neural catalyst, but nicknamed friendship gas by the human research team, represented 18 months of intensive collaboration between human and Zephyrian scientists. Unlike the original Terra gas, which had been designed to modify and control, the new compound enhanced existing cognitive abilities while respecting each species' unique neurochemical patterns. Elena, Admiral Kethvar approached, his 4 arms carrying data tablets containing the latest test results. The final trials have exceeded all expectations. 17 different species have shown positive responses to species-specific variants of the compound, with no adverse effects reported. Elena smiled as she reviewed the data. The Admiral had become one of her closest colleagues over the past months. Their initial relationship as attacker and victim long since transformed into mutual respect and scientific partnership. His military precision and her creative intuition had proven to be remarkably compatible for research purposes. More importantly, she replied, the interspecies communication effects are remarkable. When researchers from different species are under the influence of compatible enhancement variants, they're able to share complex concepts that would normally be lost in translation. The communication breakthrough had been perhaps the most unexpected discovery. The enhanced cognitive states created by the compound didn't just improve individual thinking. They created a form of neurochemical compatibility that allowed different species to understand each other at levels previously thought impossible. Concepts that had no equivalent across species barriers could be shared directly through enhanced empathy and pattern recognition. Commander Webb, now Director of Interspecies Relations, was coordinating the day's demonstration with characteristic efficiency. His role had evolved far beyond anything he could have imagined during his military service. He was essentially serving as humanity's first ambassador to a truly integrated galactic community. Dr. Vasquez, he announced over the station's communication system, we're ready to begin the multicultural cognitive enhancement demonstration. All participating researchers, please report to Laboratory Complex 7. The demonstration would involve researchers from 12 different species working together under the influence of their respective enhancement compounds to solve a complex theoretical problem in quantum mechanics that had remained unsolved for over 2 centuries. If successful, it would prove that the collaborative model developed between humans and Zephyrians could be expanded to include the entire galaxy. Dr. Thompson, now serving as Chief Research Coordinator, had spent weeks preparing for the demonstration. His team had developed a theoretical physics problem that required insights from multiple scientific traditions, mathematical precision from the Crystalline Federation, intuitive leaps from human researchers, systematic analysis from Zephyrians, dimensional thinking from the gas giant dwellers, and temporal perspective from the Andromedan Collective. The beauty of this approach, he explained to the assembled researchers, is that we're not trying to make everyone think the same way. We're creating an environment where different types of thinking can combine to produce insights that no single species could achieve independently. The participating researchers took their positions around a specially designed holographic display system that could present information in formats appropriate for each species' sensory capabilities. Human researchers saw visual displays and mathematical equations. Zephyrians received detailed analytical frameworks. The Crystalline Federation representatives interfaced directly with quantum probability fields. The gas giant dwellers interpreted atmospheric pressure variations that corresponded to mathematical relationships. As the enhancement compounds took effect, the laboratory filled with an atmosphere of focused concentration unlike anything previously experienced in galactic history. Each researcher maintained their species' unique cognitive style while gaining enhanced ability to understand and build upon insights from the others. Elena watched the demonstration unfold with growing amazement. The human researchers were making intuitive leaps that provided breakthrough insights. The Zephyrians were systematically testing and verifying these insights with mathematical precision. The Crystalline Federation representatives were calculating quantum probabilities that refined the theoretical framework. The gas giant dwellers were identifying temporal paradoxes that other species had missed. The Andromedan Collective was placing the entire problem in cosmological context that expanded the scope of possible solutions. Within 6 hours, they had solved the quantum mechanics problem that had puzzled galactic civilization for 2 centuries. But, more importantly, they had demonstrated a model for interspecies collaboration that could revolutionize how intelligent beings approached complex challenges. Admiral Kethvar observed the demonstration from the command center, his expression reflecting thoughts that would have been impossible for him to imagine a year earlier. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on the assumption that conquest and dominance were the natural relationships between species. The success of the collaborative model challenged every fundamental belief about power, intelligence, and civilization that his culture had maintained for millennia. Commander Vextal, he addressed his longtime second-in-command, prepare a comprehensive report for High Command. Include full documentation of the collaborative methodologies and recommendations for restructuring our imperial policies to emphasize partnership rather than conquest. Vextal's 4 arms moved in acknowledgement, though his expression showed the same confusion that many Zephyrians experienced when contemplating the implications of their discoveries. Sir, are you recommending that the Empire abandon military expansion entirely? Kethvar considered the question carefully. The traditional Zephyrian approach of conquest and subjugation had built a powerful empire, but it had also limited their development by eliminating potential sources of innovation and collaboration. The human partnership had demonstrated that voluntary cooperation could produce results far superior to forced compliance. I'm recommending that we recognize different approaches for different situations, he replied finally. Some species may be suitable for traditional integration methods, but others, particularly those with unique capabilities like humans, should be approached as potential partners rather than targets for conquest. The philosophical shift was occurring throughout Zephyrian society. Military academies were developing new curricula that emphasized diplomatic and collaborative strategies alongside traditional warfare. Scientists who had spent their careers developing weapons were exploring peaceful applications for their research. Even the Empire's ruling council was debating fundamental changes to their expansion policies. Dr. Rodriguez had been monitoring the long-term effects of the enhancement compounds on human physiology, and her findings suggested that the benefits extended far beyond immediate cognitive improvement. We're seeing permanent positive changes in neural pathway development, she reported to the Research Council. Extended exposure to the enhancement compounds appears to increase the brain's natural adaptability and learning capacity even after the direct effects wear off. The discovery meant that collaboration with other species wasn't just immediately beneficial. It was actually improving human capabilities over time. Each interspecies research project left human participants with enhanced ability to understand and work with alien perspectives. They were literally evolving into better collaborators through their partnerships with other species. Ambassador Chun had arrived from Earth for the demonstration, and her observations reflected the broader impact of the Kepler-7 discoveries on human society. Elena, you have no idea how this has changed everything for humanity. We're receiving collaboration requests from civilizations we didn't even know existed. The University of Mars has established a new department of interspecies studies. 3 new human colonies have been founded specifically to serve as joint research facilities with alien partners. Elena nodded, though her attention was focused on the broader implications. Sarah, I think we're witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just human advancement, but the emergence of true interspecies civilization. Different species working together not because they're forced to, but because they achieve better results through collaboration. The observation was supported by data from across the galaxy. Word of the successful human-Zephyrian partnership had spread through interstellar communication networks, inspiring other species to reconsider their own relationships with neighbors and potential partners. Traditional conflicts were being resolved through collaborative research projects. Trade relationships were evolving into genuine scientific partnerships. Young Zephyrian researcher Jektal, who had become one of Elena's closest collaborators, offered a perspective that represented the generational changes occurring within the Empire. Dr. Vasquez, my generation of Zephyrians is having difficulty understanding why our ancestors believed conquest was necessary. The collaborative model produces superior results while maintaining the autonomy and dignity of all participants. It seems obviously preferable to forced integration. Elena smiled at the young scientist's observation. The generational shift was occurring among humans as well. Students who grew up learning about the Kepler 7 incident as history rather than current events were developing fundamentally different assumptions about interspecies relationships. They expected collaboration, mutual respect, and shared benefits rather than conflict and dominance. As the day's demonstrations concluded, Commander Webb found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, he had been commanding a small research station that was attacked by an alien warship. Today, he was directing the galaxy's premier example of interspecies cooperation and scientific advancement. Dr. Vasquez, he addressed Elena as they watched the last of the demonstration participants filing out of the laboratory. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Zephyrians had used a different weapon? Something that actually worked as intended. Elena considered the question thoughtfully. Marcus, I think the outcome might have been the same, just through a different path. Humans seem to have a talent for finding opportunities in adversity. If they had conquered us militarily, we probably would have found some way to turn that into an advantage as well. Her observation reflected a growing understanding of humanity's role in galactic civilization. Humans weren't succeeding because they were militarily superior or technologically advanced. They were succeeding because they possessed a unique ability to transform challenges into opportunities and enemies into allies. Admiral Kethvar approached them as they prepared to leave the laboratory. Commander Webb, Dr. Vasquez, I wanted to thank you personally for the transformation you facilitated. When I arrived here a year ago, I was expecting to add another conquered species to the Empire's records. Instead, I discovered partners who have revolutionized our understanding of what civilization can achieve. Webb extended his hand in a human gesture of greeting that had become standard protocol for interspecies interactions. Admiral, we're grateful for your willingness to recognize the potential for partnership rather than insisting on conquest. That decision has benefited both our species immeasurably. As the 3 stood in the laboratory that had become the symbol of interspecies collaboration, they represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Former enemies who had become partners, researchers who had transformed a weapon into a tool for advancement, and civilizations that had discovered that their differences made them stronger rather than weaker. The terror gas that was supposed to have reduced humans to compliant subjects had instead revealed their capacity for turning adversity into opportunity. The military attack that was meant to demonstrate Zephyrian power had instead shown the superiority of cooperation over conquest. The encounter that began with fear and violence had become the foundation for a new model of galactic civilization based on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and collaborative advancement. Elena looked out through the laboratory's observation windows at the ships, from dozens of species that had come to witness their demonstration. Each vessel represented a civilization that had chosen cooperation over conflict, partnership over dominance, and shared advancement over individual achievement. You know, she said quietly, I think we've proven something important here. The universe is vast enough and complex enough that no single species, no matter how advanced, can understand it completely. But working together, sharing our different perspectives and capabilities, we might actually have a chance of figuring out the really big questions. Admiral Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what Elena had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a smile. Dr. Vasquez, I believe that may be the most profound discovery we've made. The universe isn't just vast, it's designed for collaboration. As the day cycle ended and the various species prepared for their different rest requirements, the research station continued its work. In laboratories throughout the facility, human intuition combined with Zephyrian analysis, crystalline precision merged with gas giant creativity, and Andromedan wisdom-guided projects that would benefit the entire galaxy. The Terror gas had failed in its intended purpose, but its legacy had become something far more valuable than any weapon. It had become the catalyst for proving that the galaxy's greatest challenges could be solved not through conquest and dominance, but through the simple recognition that different species, working together with mutual respect and shared purpose, could achieve things that none could accomplish alone. And, in the end, that discovery was worth more than any victory achieved through force. The humans had breathed in terror gas and smiled, not because they were immune to fear, but because they had the wisdom to see opportunity where others saw only threat. That wisdom had transformed not just their own future, but the future of galactic civilization itself.